and welcome. Today I have a art tag for you. I start with some Bristol smooth paper that I cut on my Cricut in the shape of a tag, but you can use tags you've bought or make a tag that'd be pretty easy to make, I think, by hand. And I'm adding some distressed inks. The first color I'm adding is Worn Lipstick. It's a color I don't use that often, although I do like it. I've ordered a new one because this one kind of looks like it's a little dry. It's not going on real smooth. So I do have another one on the way. I do have, it seems like a little storm brewing outside in case you hear thunder. I'm going to dry the worn lipstick, and then I had it on the side because I was using it for another project, this stencil, and it has some kitsch flamingo on it in the Oxide version. And so I just sprayed it to get it wet and dropped it down on my tag. It's a great way to get another color with some design on it, and I always think it looks awesome. Now, often if I didn't get a great result, I might put more on and lay down, but I was fine with how it was because I'm going to be adding some stuff. So the area I want to be visible is, and so that's fine. I'm taking a different stencil and I'm going to be adding some Crackle texture paste. This happens to be the Ranger version because I was unable to get the Tim Holtz Distress version, but it works just fine. And I'm just putting it down on the left side, down the bottom and the top. And for me, the trick to doing two different stencils is they got to be very different. Like, for instance, the first one was kind of like geometric lines. I mean, even though they're curved, it was lines. And so to put on top of that, I need to do something completely different. So like flowers or numbers or, something that's a big, bold design versus line work. That's my method. You may have your method that works for you, and that is perfectly fine. So I'm only wanting to using certain portions of the stencil, so I kind of have to move it around, and unless I want to wait for it to dry, I just kind of have to be careful and not get it on top of any texture paste I've already put down. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I don't want to wait for it to dry twice. So it goes on very white. When it's dry, it will not be very white because it absorbs some of the color underneath it. It hasn't dried yet. Now it's dry, and you can see it has some pinkish tone down there. And you could leave it like that. I thought it was really pretty, but I really wanted to get some orange in this tag. So I'm just decided I'm going to lay that stencil back down, cover up where I do not want the orange, and use some Oxide spray because it's the only orange I have. I probably would have not used Oxide, but Oxide's fine. And just coming over the texture paste with a spray. And there are like little tiny pieces that maybe didn't get any ink on them, And so when that happens, I'll take a little brush and just dip it in the ink on the stencil and just kind of color the spots that I want to have more ink on them. Or you can leave it. I am not about perfection. So I'm just going to move the stencil around. I wanted to make sure there wasn't any on the back side to get laid onto the stencil. And I'm covering up the area that I'm afraid might get sprayed, but laying it back down. And you might be worried about that existing ink getting on there, but I just made sure there wasn't any on the back. That little drip might have caused me problems, but I just wiped it off. And so now I'm just covering up the areas that I don't want to get sprayed, and I just give a couple more squirts of spray. So now I have orange on my texture paste. Now it's gonna go into the texture paste, so it'll kind of turn not as kind of dry, not as bright, duller version of it. And I do want to have some grunge in there, so I'm going to add some vintage photo. If you don't want grunge, it's perfectly fine. You could do some white spatter or some gold spatter, even pink, a different pink would be fun. But I like a little bit of grunge. Sometimes a lot of grunge, but I like a little bit of grunge. So I'm mainly doing it in over the flowers so that the vintage photo is what I'm using, sorry, goes down in the cracks and crevices some, and just around, mainly on that side. I put some on the other, but that's not where I wanted it to really focus. And then I'm being very careful because that vintage photo is still wet, and just doing some edges of the tag with vintage photo. I think giving it an edge helps bring boundaries in on the tag and just kind of gives it borders. It makes a big difference to me. And so now it's dry, and I'm got some pieces here I'm going to put on. I've got a couple flowers. They're digital downloads that I have printed on some cardstock, and now I'm in fussy cut, and now I am just giving the edges a little bit of vintage photo. These are one of the first ones that I printed, and I just still had in my stash because I printed them on a little heavier cardstock, and that's just harder to cut out. And so I've always been pulling out newer ones, and so, but these are the two I wanted in the color, so I decided to go ahead and cut out the little heavier cardstock and just get done with them. I'm adding a few pieces of ephemera down at the bottom, not a lot, and they are 2 pieces of digital downloads and 1 Tim Holtz number list. And also I add a Tim Holtz sentiment. But I'm just gluing them down. And remember, whenever you're gluing down to texture paste, it's a glue and hold, because if you don't hold it, it just will not grab that texture paste and it will peel back. So that is my advice, is to glue and just apply some pressure a little bit longer than what you normally would. You normally might think, oh, I'm surprised she's covering up the texture paste and not having it on the right side. And I originally was going to do that, but I just really liked the effect of the stencil laid on the original pink, and I just love seeing those lines. It was just so pretty. It's a lot prettier in person, to be honest. It's hard for you to see the depth of color that's really on the tag. And now the second one. And I'm going to add a sentiment. This is from the clippings, mainly because they're brown backgrounds, so I don't have to do a lot to get them ready. And this one says, "The summer sun shines." And I just thought, well, those zinnias really look like they're reaching to the sun. And it is summer in Florida, and until there's a rainstorm, which happens often, but the sun is shining. And if you didn't want that in the middle, you could put that on the bottom. I just kind of like to move them around sometimes. The last thing I'm going to do is a ribbon. I use that rayon seam binding for my ribbons, and they absorb the ink so well and can look a little wrinkly, so I like using them. I'm putting down a little bit of the orange, and then a little bit of the that's carved pumpkin. I don't know if I ever said that. That is carved pumpkin, and then some kitsch flamingo. And even that, I liked it, but I needed it to be a little dirtier, so I added a little bit of vintage photo just to make it a little dirty looking, and then I dry it and put it on. I will have some final pictures coming up. I invite you to look for those. If you haven't subscribed, I invite you to do that. Did you know it's free? It doesn't cost you anything. And if you like what you saw, if you like this piece, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it greatly. And that is all. Like I said, final pictures are coming up, and I will see you next time.